Hello, everyone. I hope all of you are doing amazing and keeping yourself and your family safe and observing social distancing. My name is Neelab Kayani, and I'm here to talk to you guys about the GRE verbal section and the analytical section. In the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to go through what exactly is the verbal section and the analytical section in the GRE, and what are the different tips, techniques, strategies that you can use in order to prepare for the exam. And we're also going to discuss the different type of resources that might be available to you to help you prepare for the exam. Before I start the session, I will introduce myself very briefly. Like I said, and as displayed on the screen, my name is Neelab Kayani. I am currently associated with academia. Before that, I completed my master's in human resource management from Fox Business School, Temple University through Fulbright. And ever since I came back, I have been associated with academia and teaching in the area of management and human resource management in specific. Okay. So we'll start off with a session of the workshop itself. This session itself is a part of the series of workshops conducted by USEFP to help you prepare for a GRE exam, both the quantitative as well as verbal section. There are a couple of other very useful videos that have already been posted by the USEFP page, and I will encourage you guys to go check them out and make use of all the resources that are available to you and all of the videos, because they talk about some of very useful tips and techniques and strategies that are definitely going to help you achieve the perfect score that you're looking for. Okay, we'll start off. Before I start with the presentation or the session itself, I will walk you through exactly what we're going to cover in this session. We're going to talk about what exactly GRE is, why do you need to take the GRE exam, what is the purpose of the exam itself, and certain other questions that I very commonly get about the scores, about the resources, about what is a good point to start, so on and so forth. And then, like I said, what are the resources, which one would I recommend, or which one are the sources that a lot of other people would recommend for both if you are at a beginner level or if you are at an advanced level. Then we're going to go into the details about what is the pattern of the analytical section and the verbal section. And then lastly, we're going to start off with how to prepare for the exam and very specifically talk about certain tips and strategies that can help you make the best use of your time as well as your efforts. One thing that I want to make clear in the beginning is this session is more geared towards a very basic level, which means that it is going to be useful for people who have just started their preparation or thinking to start preparing for the exam, because there are so many resources available out there on the internet. There are so many books, there are so many other applications, so many apps that are there that it can be a little bit overwhelming if you have just started to sort out all the information that is there. Where should you start? What can be a good point to start? How much time do you need? So my focus would be to kind of sift out that information for you guys, and to give you sort of a roadmap or a checklist that you can use from start till end to start your preparation journey. We are definitely going to talk about different strategies that you can use for each of the different types of the questions that you will see in the verbal section. However, the idea behind the session or this presentation would be to make sure that I break down the process of starting your preparation for the GRE exam, right? So it would be a very good starting point, like I said, if you have just started preparing for it or are thinking about starting to prepare for it and trying to kind of streamline your process and organize your process. Because there are time restrictions, so we are not going to go into a lot of details about a lot of strategies that are available. Again, for that, I will highly recommend that you check out a couple of other videos that have been posted that do talk about, that are more on the advanced level, and they jump right into let's say the different type of questions that can be there, the reading comprehension question, the text completion question, the sentence equivalence question, and then they talk about very specific methods or techniques or strategies to tackle or crack those questions. So a good idea would be to go through this session, go through this presentation. This is going to give you a roadmap as to how you can start and progress through through your preparation, and then check out those other videos to know more in detail as to how to handle each specific kind of a question. Okay, so coming back to the first question, what exactly is GRE? It is Graduate Record Examination, and this is an exam that you will have to take if you're applying for a master or a PhD. I do want to clarify here again that there is a difference between GRE and a GMAT exam. Roughly speaking, if you're from a business background or applying to a business school, a lot of schools do ask for a GMAT exam. So it would be a good idea for you to check whether your school accepts a GRE score or a GMAT score. GRE, broadly speaking, is more widely accepted in a lot of different universities. But if you are applying specifically for a business school, you will have to check whether they will accept the GRE score or will they need GMAT score, because GRE and GMAT are two different kind of exams, and there are different scores for both of them. So that's the first thing that you will have to check, that what is the requirement of your school and what exactly are they looking for. Okay. The next question, and a question that gets asked very often, is what exactly is a good GRE score? The simplest answer is that there is no single numeric number that can be associated with a good score. Obviously, the more you score, the better it is, but nobody can pinpoint a single specific number as to this exactly is a good GRE score, because it depends upon a lot of factors. The most important ones are the field or the area of your specialization and the school that you're applying into. There can be some areas and some fields for which maybe the quant score is going to matter more than the verbal score. And then there can be some fields or areas of specialization where your verbal score will carry more of an importance compared to your quant score. So it totally depends upon the area that you are going into or applying into. The second thing is the school. Different schools will have different averages of the GRE score of the number of people or the students that they took in that program. So it can also vary from school to school. So it will be dependent upon the school that you're looking at in order to get an admission into. A good source to check that would be to go to the school's website or the university's website and check out the class profiles to get a fair enough idea of what the average GRE score of the previous intake was. That is going to give you a rough idea of what is the number that you are looking for or the school is looking for while they are inducting people into the school. However, again, I would like to highlight this point that in order to secure admission, whether into a university or if you're applying for a Fulbright program, the GRE score is in and itself is not the only indicator of whether you're going to be able to get into a program or not. There are a lot of other factors that also contribute towards the success of your application or to help you secure a position in a certain program. So again, the score, what is a good score? The higher you score, the better, obviously, but there is no specific number that anybody can give you as to exactly this is a universally accepted good score or not. That is dependent on your field, that is dependent upon the school that you're trying to apply into. Having said that, obviously your intention and motivation should be to make sure that you get the highest possible score as much as you can get, because obviously that is generally speaking going to help you help your application stand out or your score stand out. Now that we have done with all the generic questions, understood what this exam is, what it is used for, we're going to start off with where can you start your preparation from. There are a lot of GRE preparation resources available. Different things work for different people. It's a very personal experience. So obviously you're free to go or use whatever resources you can easily access or whatever resources work best for you. The tips, the techniques, the strategies that we are going to talk about, they are going to be generally applicable no matter what resource you're using. I am going to talk about a couple of them that I have personally used or the people I know who have been through this process have used and recommend, and that have worked for a wider audience, so that it can at least give you a couple of options that you can check out. You obviously have a few free resources available, and then there are a couple of resources that are available for purchase. You can go for either of them. Your free resources, your first and most authentic resource that you should always go back to in order to confirm certain things, or whatever questions that you might have, is your EDS website. That is the most credible source of information that you have for a GRE exam, right? The website has free practice tests available. Then there are math review and basic math section convention documentations that you can also check out. But this is the website that you will or should go to if you're trying to understand the pattern, if you're trying to understand the scores, if you're trying to understand anything about the exam in general, because this is the most credible source of information, right? The second free resource, and which is a very good resource, is the Khan Academy, because they have a couple of videos on the GRE prep itself. You can check them out if you want to explore a certain area, if you have questions about certain strategies, if you have questions about certain types of questions that might appear on GRE exam, you can go check those videos out. The third and my favorite one is the Magoosh app. It is very, very good for practicing the vocabulary. We are going to come to that point later when we talk about how to build your vocabulary, or what are the different methods through which you can actually improve your vocabulary, because this is something that is very easily accessible, something that you can just have on your phones or on your desktop, whichever works best for you. And it can help you revise the words that you have memorized over and over again. So, and not only just memorize the words, but it also gives you sentences. It also gives you the meaning of that word in a particular context. So I find this app to be a very useful resource and a very convenient resource to use. And we are going to talk more about that later in the presentation. Okay, so these were some of the free resources that are available to you. Then there are resources that are available for purchase. I am going to list down only a few of them. There are many other, and all of them have worked for people. So you're free to use whatever resource, whatever book can work best for you. The first one obviously is the official GRE prep material and apps. They are available on the EDS website. You can check them out and see whichever one you think are going to work best for you and get those. Then there are Barron's GRE prep books, the Kaplan book, Manhattan series, and there's also Person. These are all the books that you can get to practice the exam. GRE is basically as much about preparation, as much as about concepts and techniques and strategies as it is about practice. So the more you practice, the better you get at it. You can use multiple resources, either all of them or few of them, to keep on practicing whatever you have learned in order to make sure that you are improving upon whatever you've learned through your preparation journey, right? Then the next question is, how much time do you need to prepare? Again, it's a very subjective question. It depends upon a lot of factors. It varies from individual to individual. It will depend upon your schedule. It will depend upon your work schedule. It will depend upon what are the commitments you have, how much time you can take out. So you will really have to carve that roadmap out for yourself. Generally speaking, I do suggest that you should not ideally spend more than 3 months to prepare, because like I said, GRE is about practice and being smart about how you approach a certain question. If you spend too much of a time preparing for it, then kind of some of the things that you've learned early on in the process, you might just start forgetting them, let's say, or might not be using them as actively later on as you were using them in the beginning. So try to kind of limit your preparation time to, roughly speaking, not more than 3 months, because you don't really need more than 3 months to prepare if you have been preparing religiously, or if you have been preparing consistently over a period of 3 months. So anywhere between, let's say, 1 month to 3 months should be a good enough time to prepare for the exam. And also please do keep in mind that GRE prep is not about like sitting on your desk for 12 hours straight and trying to prepare and trying to practice and trying to memorize things. That's not the ideal way of preparing for it. We're going to discuss a little bit about what exactly the verbal section of GRE is trying to measure, and why just sitting at your desk for like extended period of time and trying to memorize words is not the best strategy. So approximately 3 hours every day, if you can take that time out, should be good enough. And then not more than 3 months, you should be good to go, right? Okay. Now to start off with, there's so much, we've talked about resources. We know whatever resources are available. How exactly do we go about it? Where should we start? The first thing that you should be doing, and we're also going to do in this presentation, and that is the basic point of this presentation, is understand the format of the exam itself and familiarize yourself with it. You have to make sure that you are absolutely clear on what kind of questions does the GRE include, what are the different type of questions that are there, what is expected of you while you're answering each of those different type of questions. The second thing is, it is not a test of memorization, so you have to be smart about it. It is not just the test about how many words do you know, how many meanings do you know, or how many formulas do you know for that matter. It is not testing your memory at all. It is testing your analytical ability. It is testing your ability to draw conclusions. It is testing your ability to think about whatever information has been provided to you in a very analytical way and be able to draw conclusions and make connections and so on and so forth. So you have to approach it from the right mindset, and you have to know right from the beginning that you're not diving into it to memorize or improve your memory or sharpen your memory or improve your vocabulary. Although improving your vocabulary is important, we'll discuss that as well, but that's not it. That's not the only thing that is going to help you out. The third thing is practice, practice, and practice. The more you practice, the better your score will be. GRE, again, is all about being smart and then practicing whatever you've learned, because that kind of will help you save time at the end of the day, approach questions in a very more quickly than compared to if you have not practiced well enough. Okay, just a sample roadmap for anybody out there who might be feeling a little lost as to what can be a systematic approach as to start the process, how I would do it, or how I did it. I would always recommend other people or my students do it, that start off with taking a diagnostic test. Do not skip this step, even if you're confident about your ability to tackle the questions, because it can really help you identify the areas that you should be spending more time on and the areas that you can just, you're more good at and you do not need to spend too much of your time. So take that diagnostic test. You can take your diagnostic test from anywhere. If you're using the resources that have been mentioned in that presentation, then let's say Barron's does have a diagnostic test included in the book. You can just start that. That can be the simplest and the easiest way to start. Then you review your score. Before I move on, you can also take the diagnostic test or from the EDS website once you register for the GRE exam. It does give you access to 2 free complete exams that you can take. So that is something that you can make use of, right? Once you have taken the diagnostic test, then you will review your score, and that is going to help you figure out which questions or areas were the hardest for you. For example, if we talk about the verbal section, maybe the comprehension questions are something that you found yourself struggling with, or the reading, the sentence equivalence question were the questions that you found yourself to be struggling with, so on and so forth. So diagnostic test is going to help you understand what are your weak areas and the areas that you need to improve on. And then the next step, the start preparing phase. Once you start preparing phase, you will be able to focus your attention more on your weak areas. Also, this is a stage where you are going to learn and apply tips and tricks to tackle questions, specifically focusing on areas you needed help with, like I said before. One thing that I would like to highlight at this point is this is a crucial step where you will have to unlearn a lot of things and learn new tips and techniques and strategies and apply them over and over again. For example, when we talk about the reading comprehension part, somebody or all of us might have this instinctive temptation, let's say, to approach a question in a certain way, to summarize things in a certain way, and then to jump onto the answer without even, maybe reading all of those things very meticulously, so on and so forth. What you're doing in this preparation phase is that you are not only trying to learn the tips and techniques and strategies, but you're also preparing your mind or working your brain muscles to really apply the techniques and the tips that you have used. It sounds simple enough at this point in time, but you will see once you start practicing that your mind will want to keep on going back to how you're used to approaching a certain question or tackling a certain question or answering a certain question. And that is where you will have to practice that if you're learning certain new tips or techniques or tricks that are going to help you address or tackle the questions that are at hand, you will have to practice using those strategies over and over and over again till the point that they become second nature to you whenever such questions come up. Once you have prepared and you're confident enough that you think that you can take the test fairly confidently, take that mock test that I was mentioning that is available on the EDS website, because that's available for free and you should make use of it. Review your performance again and see whether the tips and techniques that you learned or the tricks that you learned, did they help you tackle the questions better this time compared to when you were doing it during the diagnostic phase. Then this will also give you an idea of how far you have come along in your journey compared to when you took your diagnostic test in the beginning and now at one point you're standing, and further going to help you that whether you're moving in the right direction or not. And then you will continue preparation again and then practice again. And lastly, you're going to take the mock test again and measure your performance. Okay, now that we are done with all the basic information about the exam, all the basic information about what can be a rough roadmap, we're going to dive into the major chunk of this presentation, which is the verbal reasoning section. I said in the beginning that GRE in general and verbal reasoning, again in particular, is not just a test of memorization. So what exactly it is? It tests your ability to analyze and draw information and conclusion. Whether if you read a certain passage, are you able to accurately conclude or summarize what exactly the author was trying to say? Are you able to identify the purpose or the function of the different paragraphs that were present in that passage? Are you able to filter out the important from non-important points? Are you able to filter out the major points from the minor points that have been mentioned in a paragraph? So it's all about your ability to understand information contextually and to analyze that information and to be able to draw a conclusion from that, from whatever information has been presented to you. It also tests your ability to select important points, like I said, distinguish between relevant and irrelevant points, distinguish between what is the crux of the passage and what are the examples that have been used to support the point that the author was making. Whether you have this ability to be able to differentiate the main point that the author was trying to make and the supporting points that the author made in order to strengthen the main point that the author had already stated. And then it tests your ability to understand the meaning of words and the relationship in a particular context. That is one of the biggest debate that goes on, that whether vocabulary is important, whether it is important to memorize words or not, whether it is important to memorize the words and meanings. The simplest answer for that would be yes, it is important to memorize the vocabulary. It is important to improve your vocabulary, and to memorize the words. But you also need to be able to understand and use those words in the context and be able to understand the relationship of the words. Again, it does not test simple memorization of words and their meanings. It will definitely help to expand your vocabulary. There's no debate about that, because the more words you know, the better your understanding of the entire passage would be, the better your understanding of the question would be. But I will again stress upon the fact that while you are expanding your vocabulary, while you are memorizing new words, pay equal attention to how and where to use those words, how exactly a word becomes appropriate in a certain context, but will not be appropriate in a different context, despite the fact that it will mean roughly the same. So your ability to be able to use the word appropriately will be as important as your ability to, let's say, whether you know the meaning of the word or not. Which brings me to the next point of how can you improve your verbal reasoning section score is to read. We are definitely going to talk about specific methods of that you can use to improve your score. But before I do that, before I mention that, one thing that I would like to stress is you have to incorporate reading in your GRE preparation journey. If you're not reading, if you're not improving, if you're not increasing the amount of reading that you usually do, your preparation is not going to be very effective. Reason being, like we discussed in the beginning, that the verbal reasoning section is about your ability to draw conclusions, your ability to understand arguments, your ability to make sense of what is being said, right? That cannot be improved upon until and unless you read a lot of material. So before we go into start talking about the specific details and methods and procedures and processes, one advice that I would give is try to make sure that you set a certain target for yourself for every week. It can be, I don't know, whatever works best for you, maybe 2 articles per week or 3 articles per week from different sources, credible sources that you should read. And do not just read them passively. Read them, then try to create a mental summary of what exactly you have read, and try to draw the conclusion based upon the passage, whatever was presented to you. It is going to help you in 2 ways. One, it is going to improve your reading speed, which is going to really help you when you're in a time crunch and when you're reading long passages while you're taking the test, because the more you practice reading, obviously your reading speed improves as well. Second, it is going to help you to be able to understand what is being said, to be able to draw connections between different paragraphs in a passage, and just be better at summarizing the basic idea. Again, do try to read passages, paragraphs, articles, whatever you're reading from areas outside of your comfort zone. For example, let's say if you are from a certain I'd say finance background, try also reading articles or passages or paragraphs from science background. Or if you're from a science background, try reading stuff from an economic background, whatever that might be. Because the thing is, the GRE passages, there are a mix of passages from a variety of different fields. They can be passages from literature, art, science, any kind of technology, engineering, so on and so forth. So reading stuff from multiple areas and disciplines is also going to make you comfortable with making sense of information that has been provided, even if it is something that you do not generally understand, right? So that's the first takeaway that we're taking from this session, is improving your reading is as important a step in your GRE prep as any of the other sections, or preparing for it, or using techniques and strategies, so on and so forth. So we are going to read, and read as much as we can. Okay, let's move on to what are the different types of questions that you will see on the exam. So there are 3 basic types of questions that are going to appear: the reading comprehension, the text completion, and the sentence equivalence. The reading comprehension question is going to further have 3 different types of questions, or 3 different ways in which the questions will be asked. The first is a multiple choice question, your common MCQs. which will give you 5 answer choices, and you will have to select one correct answer. The second type of question, question in the reading comprehension is your multiple choice question, but you will have to select one or more answer choices. So you will be given 3 choices, and you will have to select all that are correct. Now, there can be 1 that is correct, there can be 2 that are correct, and all 3 of them can be correct as well. The catch here is that you will get a credit for this question only if you get all of the answer choices correct. For example, if the correct answer was A and B, and if you have chosen only A, you're not going to get any score for that. For you to be able to get the score, you will have to get all the answer choices correctly. In the same way, if A, B, and C all were correct and you only chose like A and B, again, you're not going to get any score. So you will have to get all of them right in order to get the right score. And in the same way, let's say if the correct answer was only A and you chose both A and C, again, you're not going to get any score regardless of the fact that A was a part of the correct answer. But since you chose C as well, which was not the correct answer, so you're not going to get a score for that. The third type is the select in passage. For that, they will ask you to select a sentence in the passage that meets a certain description, whatever that question is. In order to answer that type of question, you will just have to go back to the passage and click on the sentence that you think is the answer for that question. Okay, now that we have understood the different types of question that you might see in the reading comprehension part, let's practice one question and see how can you approach that question. This is one of the examples. The question that you see on screen is one of the example of a medium-sized passage that you might see on your exam. When it comes to reading comprehension, roughly speaking, the passages that you will see can be divided into 3 categories. You can either have short passages, they're usually 10 to 20 lines. Then you have medium length passages, which are usually 20 to 40 lines, and you typically have 3 questions at the end of those passages. And then there are long questions, or long passages, which can be 50 plus lines, and usually you have 4 questions that follow that passage. And then there is another type of question, which is a paragraph argument question or passage, which typically has 8 to 12 lines, and it is followed by only a single question. There are different strategies that you can incorporate to be able to understand the questions better. Before I practice one of the questions with you, I will very briefly run down the different approaches or methods that you can use in order to answer these type of questions. The first thing is that you will do while you're reading that passage is that you are going to try to make a mental summary of what is being said. Now, that does not mean that you will have to have a very meticulous summary about exactly down to the very details about each and everything that has been discussed. It just means that you should be able to summarize in a line or 2 in your head of what exactly this passage is talking about. And then you should be able to identify the function of each of the paragraph or the line that is present in the passage. One of the advice that I always give is please do not get caught up into the details. It is a very, it sometimes is very tempting to try to want to know the meaning of every word that is present in the passage or trying to understand all the processes that have been mentioned. Do not do that, because your goal here is not to master the art or the science that have been explained in the passage. Your goal here is to understand the crux of the passage and then be able to answer the questions that you're going to be asked, right? So you will have to maintain a very fine balance here of understanding the basic idea without getting bogged down into the nitty-gritties or the specific details of it, right? So to summarize, while you're reading the passage, what you're doing is you're creating a mental summary. You're trying to summarize the passage in your head, or each paragraph in a passage, if it is a long passage, in 1 or 2 lines, to kind of create a mental map as to what is being talked about. Second, you're also trying to understand the function of each of the paragraph, again for a longer passage, or every line to see what role does that line or passage or what role does that line or paragraph play in that passage. And then you're not going to try to go into too much of that detail. Okay, now to apply the things that we have just discussed, let's read this passage together and see what exactly is being discussed about and talked about here. It says, policymakers must confront the dilemma that fossil fuels continue to be an indispensable source of energy, even though burning them produces atmospheric accumulation of carbon dioxide that increase the likelihood of potentially disastrous global climate change. So you're going to stop here and you're going to create a mental map that fossil fuels are an indispensable source of energy, despite the fact that burning them produces carbon dioxide, which is harmful for the climate. That's one point that has been made. Then it moves forward and says, currently, technology that would capture carbon dioxide emitted by power plants and sequester it harmlessly underground or undersea instead of releasing it into the atmosphere might double the cost of generating electricity. Now, there is another point that is being tackled here, which says that although there is technology that can help minimize the harmful impact of carbon dioxide, however, that is going to double the cost of generating electricity. So far, 2 points have been made. Fossil fuels are an indispensable source of energy. However, they emit carbon dioxide, which is harmful. The second point says there is technology that can minimize the harmful impact of carbon dioxide. However, that can double the cost of generating electricity. And then it moves forward saying, but because sequestration does not affect the cost of electricity transmission and distribution, delivered prices will rise less by no more than 50%. Research into better technologies for capturing carbon dioxide will undoubtedly lead to lower cost. So the last part talks about the fact that although there is a possibility of the cost being doubled, however, over time, the cost is probably not going to rise more than 50% because sequestration, the process that they were talking about, is not going to impact the cost of transmission and distribution, which is also a part of the overall cost that a consumer will, let's say, incur while they're paying for that electricity, right? So you see, that's how we have kind of tried to apply all of the concepts where we talk about the fact that create summaries and then try to understand the function of each of the passages. Now we'll move forward to the type of questions that we will see at the end of this passage. And then we're also going to talk about the different answer traps that are generally put into the answers to kind of confuse and to kind of see your ability to be able to distinguish the correct answer from the incorrect answer. The first question is, which is an example of multiple choice question where you have to choose only one answer. It says the passage implies which of the following about the current cost of generating electricity. It is very, very important to pay attention to exactly what is being asked. If you're not paying attention, you can just very generally assume that the question says, what does the passage imply? That's not what the question is asking. Although it says what the passage implies, but it is talking about the implication of a very specific element that was discussed, which is the current cost of generating electricity. When we see the options, we'll see why does this become important to pay attention to the fact that we are only asked about the implication of the current cost of generating electricity. If you look at the options that are given there, I'll give you a minute to read through the options because I want to discuss the different traps that are present and that would generally be present in the answers and how you can identify them. Okay, I hope you have read that. Even if you haven't read that, you can just read it while we're discussing it. One very common trap is, generally speaking, they will throw in very familiar words into the answer choices that you would have, let's say, seen repeated very often into the passage itself. Now, what happens is you end up going for answers that appear to be very familiar, let's say, because you have read it over and over again. So your mind kind of tells you that because you know that word and because you know that that word has been used in the passage, so maybe that is the correct answer. For example, option B here talks about it is somewhat less than the cost of electricity transmission and distribution. Maybe when you read the words transmission, electricity, distribution, cost, less than the cost, you will kind of be maybe tempted to answer that question. However, this is not the correct answer because nowhere does it talk about the fact that the current cost of generating electricity is less than the cost of electricity transmission and distribution, because they have not talked about the comparison between the cost of generating electricity and the cost of transmission and distribution of the electricity. So B tells you something that has not been talked about in the passage, which brings me to my second point, is that you have to rely only on the information that has been provided in the passage itself. If something has not been mentioned in the passage, if some fact has not been mentioned in the passage, that can never be your correct answer. The passage does not talk anything about the comparison of the cost of generation of electricity or the transmission of electricity or distribution of electricity. So option B is something that you will check out, and that cannot be the correct answer. Another trap that usually exists is that they're going to throw in a fact, which is true, but it might be true in some other part of the passage, but not exactly the part that they were talking about. And the third trap is usually they will just throw in some information which had not even been discussed in the passage. If you look at option D and E, D says it is dwelt on by policymakers to the exclusion of other costs associated with electricity delivery. That is something that has not been mentioned anywhere in the passage, so this cannot be the correct answer. And E says it is not fully recovered by the prices charged directly to electricity consumers. Again, nothing has been discussed about the prices charged to the electricity consumer, so on and so forth, so that cannot be correct answer. If you notice, while trying to figure out the answer, what I was doing was I was eliminating the options which were absolutely incorrect. That is one of the examples of how you use the process of elimination, that you try to minimize the options that can be categorized as correct options. So we have chosen that B, D, and E are absolutely incorrect answers, and they are the answers that you can very conveniently eliminate right in the beginning. That leaves us with two options, which can be equally tempting. The first says it is higher than it would be if better technologies for capturing carbon dioxide were available. Now, the thing is, if you were not paying attention, you might end up choosing this question because the last line does say that research into better technologies for capturing carbon dioxide will undoubtedly lead to lower cost. But the point here is the question asked you the implication of the passage about the current cost of generating electricity. And at present, nothing is for sure. It is only a hypothesis which says if there is research into better technologies, then the capturing carbon dioxide or research into those technologies will lead to lower cost. But at present, that is not the case. Your option A says it is higher than it would be if better technologies for capturing carbon dioxide were available. Although this is something that has been hinted in the passage, but this is not the current scenario, so you will not go for that option, which only leaves us with option C, which says it constitutes at most half of the delivered price of electricity. That is something that can be easily deduced by the line which says, because sequestration does not affect the cost of electricity transmission and distribution, therefore delivered prices will rise less by no more than 50%. So the only rise is going to be at most 50%, which is because of the fact that the electricity transmission and distribution cost is not being affected by sequestration, right? So that is kind of a conclusion that you are drawing from certain information that had been given to you in the passage. Again, to summarize, you are going to be very aware of the fact that you will never choose options that have not been mentioned in the passage or explained in the passage, or any fact that has not been mentioned in the passage. You're not going to go just for an option just because it uses familiar words. You have to be very mindful of the fact that they might have used certain words, but the information that is being given in that option is not correct. And you will also have to pay very close attention to what exactly the question is, whether the question is talking about the paragraph in general, the passage in general, or is it talking about a certain specific part of the passage itself, right? Okay, then we're going to move on to the second question, which is an example of the multiple choice question where you have to select one or more answer choices. The question asks, the passage suggests that extensive use of sequestration would, over time, have which of the following consequences? So if you go back to the passage, you know where this was talked about. It says, over time, because sequestration does not affect the cost of electricity transmission and distribution, delivered prices will rise less by no more than 50%. You'll go through your option choices. The first says, the burning of fossil fuels would eventually cease to produce atmospheric accumulation of carbon dioxide. This is absolutely incorrect, again, because the passage does not state that at any point in time, and hence this cannot be the correct option. C says, power plants would consume progressively lower quantities of fossil fuels. Again, this is something that has absolutely not been mentioned in the passage itself, so that cannot be the correct answer. That only leaves us with option B. The proportion of the delivered price of electricity due to generation would rise and then decline, and this is something that can be corroborated by what has been said in the passage, because it does talk about the fact that the sequestration technology might cost you more. However, because there's no transmission or delivery charges, so your prices are going to fall down later on, right? And the third example is, again, a question which says, select the sentence that explains why an outcome of sequestration that might have been expected would not occur. What you would do is you'll go back in the passage and click the line that you think is the correct answer. I hope that makes sense. We're going to take 30 seconds to kind of absorb all the information that has been provided. And then we're going to move on to the second type of question, which is the text completion questions. Okay, so what exactly are text completion questions? Your text completion questions are going to roughly look something like this. They're basically passages which are composed of 1 to 5 sentences, and you're going to have anywhere between 1 to 3 lines. For each of the blank that is there, you're going to have 3 options. So if there is blank 1, the answer for blank 1 will be over here in blank 1 column, and you are going to have 3 options. 1 is going to be correct. And then again, for the second blank, you're going to have for the 3 options, and 1 is going to be correct. And then for blank 3, again, you are going to have 3 options and only 1 is going to be correct. The same rule applies here as well. In order to get 1 credit or score, you have to get all of the answers correct. For example, if you chose the right option for blank 1, you chose the right option for blank 2, but you chose the incorrect option for blank 3, you're not going to get any score. If you choose the right options for all of these blanks, only then you're going to get 1 score. The important point to remember here is the answer choices of different blanks function independently. That is, selecting 1 answer choice or 1 blank does not affect what answer choice you can select for another blank. You're free to choose any option from here. You're free to choose any option from here, and you're free to choose any option for blank 3. So these 3 work independently of each other when it comes to answering the choices. There's a single correct answer, and you only get credit if all of these are correct. Now, what can be the different tips and techniques to answer that question? The first thing is, do not try to answer the first blank without reading the entire passage. always read through the entire passage to get an overall sense of it. Why is it important? Because in some of the examples, you will see that you will not be able to understand what exactly is being talked about in the passage, and hence it would be almost impossible to guess what exactly should go into the first blank. So therefore, do not try to force yourself to make sure that you have to answer all of those blanks in sequence. For example, do not feel the pressure that you cannot move forward until and unless you have chosen an answer for the blank 1 or blank 2. Rather, just read the entire passage, try to get a basic idea of what the passage is talking about, and then you can go back and fill in the options. Again, when you're going back, you do not have to go to the first blank first and the second blank second and the third blank third. You might as well start from choosing the right answer for the third blank itself, right? And that can be a correct answer. Let's practice one of the questions using this technique. It says, it is refreshing to read a book about our planet by an author who does not allow facts to be dashed by politics. Now, the reason that I said why you should not try to answer the first blank without having read the entire passage is, if you look at the options, it says overshadowed, invalidated, or eliminated. At this point in time, the overall passage can tilt at any side. It can be tilted towards the fact that the author does allow the facts to be overshadowed by politics, or maybe the author does not allow them to be overshadowed by politics. So there's no way that you can make a guess at this point in time of what exactly should go into the blank. So what you would do is you would keep on reading, well aware of the political disputes about the effects of human activities on climate and biodiversity. This author does not permit them to dash his comprehensive description of what we know about our biosphere. He emphasizes the enormous gaps in our knowledge, the sparseness of our observations, and the dash calling attention to the many aspects of planetary evolution that must be better understood before we can accurately diagnose the condition of our planet. By this point, if you pay attention, I think the third blank is the easiest to answer at this point in time, where you can say that he emphasizes the enormous gaps in our knowledge. So the author is of a point of view who kind of highlights the facts that there are a lot of gaps in our knowledge, the sparseness of our observation, and the dash. That means that the general inclination has been towards the fact that we do not know all. There is so much that we do not know. There is limitation in our observation. And hence, if you look at blank 3, you can very easily eliminate option H, which says certainty of our entitlement and plausibility of our hypothesis, because that does not go with the two statements that have been made before, which talk about the gap in our knowledge and the sparseness of our observation. So superficiality of our theories would be the correct answer. Now that you know at this point in time that the author is emphasizing the enormous gaps in our knowledge, the sparseness of our observation, and the superficiality of our theories, and calls to attention to the many aspects of planetary evolution must be better understood before we can accurately diagnose the condition of our planet, you will get a better idea by this point in time that in the beginning, maybe it makes more sense when you put in overshadowed, because it will generally mean it is refreshing to read a book about our planet by an author who does not allow facts to be overshadowed by politics. Invalidate would not be the correct answer, because that kind of does not fit into the overall meaning of the passage itself. Invalidate would generally mean that you are negating something or invalidating or questioning the validity of something. That is not the point here. The point here is that the author is just trying to make sure that the political beliefs are not influencing facts in any way or form, right? And then in the same way, it becomes clear that the blank number 2 should go for obscure, which kind of means that which will go with the same meaning of the entire passage. For example, overshadowed and obscure will go hand in hand because this author does not permit them to obscure his comprehensive. When you're trying for something to not overshadow, that also means that you're also trying for it to not obscure anything that you want to put forward, and so on and so forth, right? Again, to summarize, do not try to attempt to answer the first blank because you absolutely do not have to. Just try to get the basic idea of the entire passage and then answer the blank, whichever is the easiest to answer first, and then you can move forward, right? The third type of questions that are going to be there are the text completion questions. The text completion questions are going to look something like this, where you will have a single line, you will have 6 options, and you have to choose 2 words. Now, the catch here is that you have to choose 2 words, which, if replaced in the passage, will mean exactly the same thing. Meaning that the 2 answer choices that you have chosen should, if inserted in that blank, should not alter the meaning of what exactly that sentence was saying. Before we start, we go into a couple of examples. It's a very common misconception that says that just look for synonyms in the answer and the synonym is the correct answer. That is absolutely not correct, because 1, there can be 2 sets of synonyms present in the answer choices, and then in that case, you can never identify, if you were doing it just on the basis of synonyms, as to which is the correct answer or not. The idea here is not to find the perfect synonyms. The idea here, again, is to put in a word that will not alter the meaning of the sentence itself, right? The general strategies, again, I'd say is that you will have to read through the line and try to just try to insert the word that you think should fit in, right? That's one of the techniques or strategies that I would use, that before even going into or looking at the options that are given, I'd probably read the line and try to fill in it with the word that I think should fit in. That kind of helps you make sure that your answer choices are not being influenced by the words that are given. And once you have chosen the word out of memory, you can easily see that which of the options go best with that word. For example, it says, although it does contain some pioneering ideas, one would hardly characterize the work as. Okay. Now, because we are short on time here, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail as to what are the things that you should pay attention to. But one thing that I cannot stress enough is that in such questions, you have to pay very, very close attention to words such as although, however, despite that, so on and so forth, because that is going to kind of help you identify whether you're going to look for a synonym of the word or an antonym of the word, and so on and so forth, because the sentence starts with although it does contain some pioneering ideas. You will understand that there is a certain amount of qualification that is applied here, that whatever is being discussed about, it does contain some pioneering ideas, but one would hardly characterize the work as. If something does not have any pioneering ideas, that means that something is not very, let's say, original, or not very innovative, so on and so forth. So if you look at the options, orthodox will not go or will not be considered as the correct answer, because that is something that would exactly be describing this work, which does not have any pioneering ideas. Although it does contain some pioneering ideas, one would hardly characterize this as. The option that you can choose here would be either C, original, or F, innovative, because something that does not have new ideas cannot be innovative. So the work can hardly be characterized as innovative. Although original and innovative are not direct synonyms, but these are the two words that can work perfectly well into the sentence if they have been used there, right? There is another example, and if I have to, again, summarize very quickly the general tips for the sentence equivalence, that would be: do not simply look among the answer choices for two words that mean the same thing. Read the sentence to get an overall sense of it, and then identify words or phrases that seem particularly significant. For example, words like although, however, despite, in spite of, that can kind of work as signposts for you to be able to see which direction the question is going. So that was it for the comprehension, for the verbal part, the comprehension, sentence equivalence, and text completion. I have tried to make sure that I cover all the basics. At this point in time, now that you have done that, I will again highly encourage, go check out the other videos that have been posted already on the verbal sections, because they go into a lot of detail about how can you build upon your vocabulary, where should you start if you want to build upon your vocabulary. It talks about very specific techniques and tricks and strategies for dealing with each of the reading comprehension, verbal, or other type of verbal sections. So go check them out, and that can help you get more information as to how to tackle the questions. Okay, so we have moved on to the last probably 5 or 10 minutes of the presentation. I'm just going to explain what exactly is the analytical section and how can you improve your score in the analytical section. You will see two types of questions. One is analyze an issue task, and the other is analyze an argument task. The basic difference between the two is, for analyze an issue task, you will be given a topic, and that's where you will present your arguments either in favor of that topic or against that topic, or if you're maintaining a neutral position, that you will have to provide arguments on both the sides, both the favor and against, and why do you think you are on the neutral grounds. So that is a topic or a piece of writing where you are asked to express your own opinions and viewpoints. The second type is analyze an argument task. That is going to be a passage which you will have to read. You do not have to express your own opinions or your viewpoints, and you do not have to take sides in that passage. All you are doing is that you're evaluating a given argument, and you are evaluating the strength of the arguments that have been presented, and also identifying that if there is a certain amount of weakness in that passage or paragraph, whatever that was presented, how can that be strengthened and why do you think it is weak? Right? So that's a very important distinction, that do not try to bring in your own opinions in the argument task, because that is not the point. The argument task is all about you identifying the strength of any particular argument, or you identifying the strength or health of the arguments or logic that has been provided. There is no spell check and grammar check while you're taking the exam. So please make sure that you practice your writing as well. And when you're writing, you are not making smaller mistakes like that. These are some of the examples of the topics that have been taken from the EDS website directly for the analyze an issue task and an argument task. There is a pool of questions that are available on the website itself. If you want to practice writing, you can just go to the EDS website, and from that pool you can choose the argument questions or the issue questions, and then just start practicing writing. Okay, so that completes the session. I hope it helped you guys. I hope it gave you some amount of information in order to start your preparation and to know how you can move forward with that, so on and so forth. And there are other resources, again, that you can go check out and try to practice them and improve your score. That would be all from my side. Thank you so much for your time. I really hope this helps you out, and I really hope that all of you are able to achieve the perfect score, or the score you are looking for. I will say bye-bye at this point. Again, thank you so much, and good luck to all of you.